Hello, I'm Mr. Polk and welcome to my kitchen. Today what I would like to look at is continue the segment on cake decorating and look at the tools that we use and how to fill a bag, and also for you at home what things you could use if you don't have the actual pastry bags. So first thing we would use from class is we've had the pastry bags, we use those in a couple of our lessons. And one thing when you use tips, if you have the actual tips, if you have a set at home, a coupler is really nice because it allows you to put multiple tips in one bag. So I'm going to put the coupler in, and you have to cut it. And what you do is you squeeze up, again it's probably hard to see the camera, but you squeeze up, and then you push back down and it makes a mark. And that mark is what you want to cut, because you want it to go to the threads. Alright, so I'm going to throw that away so it doesn't get mixed in with anything. And again, I know you can't really see, but it goes right to the edge of the thread so that it gets tight, but it's not in the way. And if it's below the threads, it won't get tight, and your tip will just fall out. And we have different tips. Now you can buy a kit with 100 different tips. You don't need all that. All you need is a couple basic tips to do some really nice work. The first one is a number 12. We can use that one to make bead borders and dots. That's a round tip. A 21 is one of my favorites. That's an open star for borders. For leaves, I like the 67. And then for making ruffle borders and roses and rosebuds, you can use the 104. Okay, so let's start with our number 21. So we're going to put that on the end, and then we're going to put the collar on, and you just put it on until it's tight. Okay, just like that. And then you're ready to go. Now, if you remember from class, we like to cuff the bag. Okay, if you remember, it would always make the little monster guy go, wah. And then what you're going to do is take a little bit of icing and squeeze it in, because you don't want it on the end of the bag. That makes a mess. You don't want to overfill your bag, because all that's going to do is be harder to squeeze and harder to control. And then you want to twist the bag around, okay, and then just give it a little squeeze. And on the next video, I'll show you how to actually make different designs and do different things, okay? So let's say you don't have the fancy stuff at home, but you still want to follow along and try and decorate something or make something. So what you can do is you can do a couple of things. You could use Ziploc bags. Make sure they're like the freezer bag. These thinner sandwich bags have a tendency to break because the seams aren't made for the pressure. These bigger bags work nice. They're a little stronger, but then you got to watch the angle of them. The other issue is that if you look at the shape of them, you know, this angle is made for the tip. Here they're very hard to hold tips. They like to pop out. But they're good if you just want to put a hole in it and squeeze it and just try and make some bead borders. We can do that. Another option is the cone bag, the parchment. And what you're going to do is take a square of parchment, and then you do want to use parchment because, you know, we're working with food. You just don't want to use any kind of paper. So this is kitchen paper, all right, like we have in the lab. And what we're going to do is cut this in half. So we took a square, and now we have two triangles. And here's where you want to fold it together. And a lot of people just want to fold it on the angle because it already makes a triangle. But you actually want this to be your point, okay? So you bring part of it up this way, okay, and then the other part around the outside. And it's a little tricky, but as you bring it together, what happens is you're going to notice that these two half parts of the triangle, the ears that came around, will meet each other. Now one's on the front side of the cone and one's on the back. But when you do that, it puts nice pressure on here and it makes a tight point on the bottom. Now, you might be tempted to put some tape on here, and you can. I just don't like to use tape because I find that if I do, it could come off and fall in the icing, same as if I use a staple. Alright, so you just sort of fold it in, and in a minute you're going to twist it together. The tricky part is filling them, because you can't really cuff them. You don't want them to fall apart. One of the things I'm going to do is just use a little bit of icing at a time with a small spatula. And by doing that, I can sort of like drop it in so that the bag doesn't collapse on me. Once the icing's, I know it doesn't look stable right now. Once the icing's in, that makes it stable. Because then now I bring this around and I can twist it, okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and make a cut, and that makes my tip. So now if I wanted to, I could use this, and I could pipe bead borders with this, and I could make a nice looking cake. I can cut a really tiny hole and I can write happy birthday and do all that type of stuff. So, you know, if you have some parchment paper or some wax paper, I mean, you really can just make a bag out of nothing and make it work. Or you can use a Ziploc bag. Or another option is, those of you that know I always like the dollar store. The dollar store does have one there. It's really cheap, but it's something to get started. It does have a reusable bag that you would fill with icing and wash. It's got a coupler. And then it's got a couple of these little tips that you could play around with. You could even try putting these tips in your parchment paper. Alright? Like these two guys here would be like an open star. This one would be more of a point, and things like that. So you could play around with that as well. So there's a lot of things you could try and do. A couple other tools. When we ice the cake, we use a side icer. You should have some rubber spatulas and things. These would be, we officially call these a bowl knife or a palette knife, but a lot of people just call them a metal spatula. Use these for icing and things. In one of the videos I'm going to show you how to make roses, so you need a rose nail. And then when we ice our cake smooth rather than a spatula, I like to use the bowl scraper to get it smooth, and we'll talk about that later. And that's pretty much it as far as how to set your bag and what you could use to get ready for the next video, which is going to show you how to actually use the bags and make some basic borders. So thanks for visiting with me today. I hope to see you real soon right here in Mr. Polk's Kitchen.